everybody here to session number 3 of a study called Full Conversion is a When Thing. This is not an argument. This is not a debate. I understand that the conversation about conversion is more than anything else a what thing. But for this particular study, I'm titling it a when thing. And having said that, we're trying to keep everything kind of in that category. So tonight's class is entitled, You Can't Always Choose Who's in Your Pews. All right. Also, I wanted to say that Brother Kenny Lombard Brother Ken Lombardo did shoot me a text and is unable to make it, and he sent his love to everybody. He had a family situation to take care of, nothing big, just being with his daughter tonight, but had a family issue. So please know that he loves you. Can't always choose who's in your pews. Reminder or a refresher, excuse me, the first week, the title was Conversion is Like Rehabilitation. And the conversation centered around, if you can read those, please do. I'm not going to read those to you right now. The conversation circled around, is conversion, and especially if you entitle it Full Conversion, is conversion an immediate event in your life? Or is it a lifelong process? I came to the conclusion, and maybe some others did too, I don't know if I was convincing enough, I believe it's a process. I believe, like rehabilitation, that first time you ever go in and confess your sins openly is the most important first step to make. Or excuse me, the first step is the most important step you'll ever make. But you can't stop going forward at that point. And that's why I believe it's like rehabilitation. I also believe it's like rehabilitation because you can slip. And that doesn't mean you failed. It only means you've had a setback and you just get back up and start again. I don't know if you all know anything about rehab, but you usually get some kind of marker. It's called a chit, and it defines what point you are. I'm 30 days in, I'm 60 days in, I'm 2 years in. And if you slip, you start again and start counting again, but you continue moving forward, as it is with your conversion. Week 2, last week, we talked about the conversion of Paul the Apostle. I'm not going to go a whole lot further than that. It was entitled Greatest Adversary to Greatest Advocate. And Sister Terry Bravo, I absolutely loved that video. So thank you very much for emailing that to me about Paul the Apostle and his starting point. But last week, what we talked about was how Paul shocked the world. He was on his way to bring death and devastation to the city of Damascus. And so this man who was despicable in his treatment of the church was seen, I'm certain, from within of someone who could never be converted. So shocking first, because in the middle of his walk to Damascus, while going with terrorizing in his heart, he was driven to the ground and blinded. He was in that posture for 3 days. And his terrorizing, by definition, was he was arresting the people of God, and their crime being the people of God. So understand that what they were guilty of is serving the Lord and loving Jesus Christ and embracing this new message and nothing more. We know that included in that list was even Stephen, who was stoned to death. Were there others? I don't know. Sister Terry asked a fabulous question last week. How did they get away with stoning him? Was this even legal or proper? The stopping on the way to Damascus has to be understood. That think of this man thrown to the ground by the power of God, and in his pocket was a list of names and addresses of those he was going to arrest. Who were those names? Your names. I want you to understand, he had your names in his pocket, and God stopped him in his step. Understand, it was the people of Damascus, but they are us, all of us. If you claim to love Jesus Christ, your name was in his pocket, at least figuratively. But when God looked at Saul in the present, he saw Paul in the future. and he claimed him as a chosen vessel. Understand, and I hope you do understand, when you look at yourself, you see you as is, maybe filthy, maybe weak, maybe whatever state you're in. God sees something completely different, as he did with Paul the Apostle. So that's where we are now. This week, we launch into part 3. You can't always choose who's in your pews. Okay, so tonight, we're going to go back to the time of Paul's conversion. And maybe if I'm successful, you're going to experience what it felt like to be in the time of Saul of Tarsus. Now, to be sure, this is my personal fictionalization. I've done this. This is not anything from the scripture, so don't go searching for it. But I do believe what I'm going to put on the next couple slides could have happened. And my intent is to mess with your brain tonight. So understand, I confess that sin openly. I want to twist you and turn you and get you to hear what it may have felt like to be living in this time period. And the bigger question is, could it still be happening today? So let's see what I'm talking about. Did I mention the theme tonight? You can't always choose who's in your pews. Imagine you're a fully dedicated member of Jesus Church in the city of Damascus, and you've just received recent urgent warnings that Saul of Tarsus is heading to your town. Word got out, someone slipped the information in, and now they're starting to whisper to others, Saul is coming. And he's coming to do what he did, which is search you out, search others just like you out, and incarcerate you for the crime of loving Jesus Christ. Now, you've heard that Stephen was stoned to death, and that's shaken your foundation. You heard first he was arrested, and that word got to you. Then you heard he was charged. That got to you. Then you heard suddenly he was stoned to death. And so fear is permeating throughout the church. It's palpable to you and your friends and to your pew partners. Some have fled, some are in hiding, some have locked their doors. You have friends and brothers and sisters in other parts of the church. They've already been arrested. And you've heard from their families about this. Some of them you went to visit while they're in the jails, and you heard about the treatment they're getting, how horrible it is. They're being viewed and treated as prisoners and criminals. And they're in jail with common criminals. You've even lost friends. Not just Stephen, but you've even lost friends in close family to the likes of Saul of Tarsus and his entourage of others who are terrorizing. We read last week in the word that he and his group were together, so we know he's not traveling alone. He's coming with an entourage. If we were in the West and watching a Western right now, they'd be called a posse. I want you to understand who these other people are with Saul at this point. As Saul and his henchmen are coming to Damascus, you have to make a quick decision. First and primary decision, do you stay and face Saul, knowing that you're easily going to be arrested, or do you flee? Do you take advantage of options that are pouring in? Come to our house, 17 miles away, out in the hills, out in the desert. There are members of the church in other parts of the land who are providing shelter. So you have options right now. For yourself, you may not be so afraid, but you are concerned for your family. Maybe even feeling helpless in protecting your parents, your spouse, your children, and others that you call family. Consider sometimes when tornado warnings come through Kentucky. I don't often feel concern for myself, but I feel like helpless to save my family, protect my family. So maybe you're feeling that anticipation, that fear, that concern right now. And as the news heightens, your anticipation grows and fear starts to overwhelm you. Maybe your head is spinning, not knowing what to do. Stories are getting worse. And at this point, there's so many stories coming in, you can't decipher what's accurate, what's true, and what's being exaggerated. But you have heard enough stories to know this Saul of Tarsus is real, and he's mean, and he's effective. And he has identified himself by his actions as the true enemy to the saints of God. And his focus is on eliminating people just like you. And that becomes your evidence that you are one of his targets. Your emotions are creating confusion. Those emotions are fear, maybe anger, maybe frustration, maybe dread, maybe grief. Consider what you've seen over the last couple months. It's difficult to simply, and people are starting to say, just continue with life as usual, but it's difficult for you. You can't function as if nothing has changed. When you feel the fear, you immediately experience guilt, as faith feels like it's been compromised, but you can't control the fear. When you feel anger, there's no outlet for release because Saul is the cause. And you haven't even met him yet. So you have nothing to do with all that anger inside you. When you feel frustration, there's no way to be appeased because you have no control at this point. You're sitting in your home tonight waiting for the newest news. When is he getting here? Who's he bringing? How big is the entourage? What did they do at the last city? What kind of harm did they do? The frustration is off the charts. When you feel dread, sitting in your home by yourself, you feel dread. It's compounded by real and exaggerated data being intertwined. What's real? What's exaggerated? When you feel grief for those that you've lost, for the life that's now restricted even to you, you're grieving the loss of your freedom. You're grieving the sadness that everyone feels within the church. When you feel that grief, you realize there's not even time to stop and honor those that you've lost. You're living in such a swirl. Saul of Tarsus is doing horrible things to innocent, sincere family and friends. Saul leaves destruction in his path, and his victims are real people, real families, truly the church. His path is bringing him directly into your town. You are in the path of Saul of Tarsus. This very night, you're home and all present. But there's one emotion that you're unwilling to confess out loud to anyone, absolutely no one. You keep it deep within you, your secret. This feeling is your deepest, darkest secret within. And it's an odd feeling to you in this new environment. And given all that you've heard and all that you're currently experiencing while trying to navigate through life that isn't as it used to be, this emotion, this one emotion that you won't say out loud, is all you've been thinking about. And yet these very thoughts embarrass you. I've never experienced this. I've never felt this, but it's real and palpable. And that makes you feel horrible. The emotion is this: you hate Saul of Tarsus. You hate what he's doing. Stephen, you had traveled 15 miles to hear Stephen speak, and now he's gone. For so many reasons, you're filled with anger, frustration, grief, and now you're confessing, at least to yourself, you're even filled with hate. And you've never felt this before, never. while you're making final plans on exactly what to do in the next 24 hours, as everyone's talking about Saul arriving in Damascus any moment now, suddenly some unverified news breaks. Some hard to explain event has taken place with Saul on the road to Damascus. You don't know where, but you've heard he was coming to town, and now something's changed. Everybody, all your sources of information are buzzing. The rumors are that Saul has been laid out and he's immobilized on the road to Damascus. Then even newer news comes in. This new detail has Saul back on his feet and again traveling to Damascus. So again, you're back to that same question. What should you do? And how quickly do you need to decide to do it? Saul is definitely on his way. And one way or another, Saul of Tarsus is heading into Damascus right now. And no one knows what's going to happen when he finally gets to your town. Updates are sketchy. Updates are fragmented. There's been another change. Nothing seems to be making sense. Now the talk is Saul is in Damascus. The talk is, the reports are, he's been here for 2 to 3 days already. After quiet of 2 or 3 days, now you're hearing he's here. You were unaware. And that's how he comes in stealth. You didn't even know he was here. And now you're hearing he's here and he's been here 2 to 3 days. Yet people are saying, relax, you're safe. But no one's telling you why. There is little or no concrete evidence to anything you're hearing. They're just saying, stay, don't travel away. And you're wondering why. Why are they telling you to stay in Damascus if he's here? And then your mind starts to wander. Was Saul put to death? Was there some type of ironic, perfect ending to Saul of Tarsus? Was he finally, justifiably, and understandably stoned to death? Because that's what you've been hoping to hear. The lack of real details is troubling to you. Strangely unnerving to be told, just trust. Just trust. Because your mind is saying, didn't they just trust in the last city when he arrested 60 and imprisoned all of them? You're hearing there's going to be more information provided at church this Sunday. This Sunday, there's going to be more information. They're saying there'll be some formal disclosure or even disclosures about Saul at the service. You're being told to get there early because something big is going to happen. Today's world, we'd say limited seats available. You got to get there. Something huge is going to happen at church this Sunday. But for some reason, all of this feels disturbing. What big thing awaits us all? Is this some kind of attack plan? What are they talking about? But you stay in Damascus. You're not sure why, but you stay. Everyone said to stay. No one's leaving. So you follow the crowd and you stay. Did you do it because you actually feel safe? Or did you do it because you're curious about what's going to happen Sunday? You don't even know. Nothing else happens before Sunday. There's a strange quiet. If you've ever been in a hurricane, it's called the eye of the storm. You're in the middle of the eye of the storm. Quiet is not such a good thing, but that's all that's going on. So, okay, with no news, with no updates, you go to church on Sunday. And having never seen Saul of Tarsus before today, you're surprised by the guy they introduce as Saul. But they don't introduce him as Saul of Tarsus. Instead, they introduce him as formerly known as Saul of Tarsus. And they ask everyone to listen to this testimony of, and they say this, our newest convert, Brother Paul. Newest convert? Brother Paul? And at this point, you feel absolutely no connection to him. He begins his testimony. He tells of being struck down, being blinded, being taught by Jesus for 3 days. He tells how the Savior, while he's in this stupor, talks to him directly and begins by saying, "Stop persecuting me." And in his testimony, Brother Paul, as they call him, says he has stopped persecuting the people of God. He says God chastised him for those 3 days for everything he had been doing against the church. Talks about his new conversion and how it's taught him that we have to be saved from ourselves, saved from our sin, saved from our weakness. Says this only comes through mercy and forgiveness and grace and the love of Jesus Christ. And yes, it all sounds good. But yet still you question his sincerity. You doubt his story. You disbelieve on so many levels, in so many ways, and for so many reasons. Too much still unanswered. You wonder, why should you trust him? You think how easily this whole thing could be a ploy, could be a lie. It could be a way of getting inside the church. The story is he's been gathering names and addresses and status of those members of the Church of Jesus Christ in order to get all of us. And now, based on some far-fetched story, the church blindly invites him inside, and he has access to all of you. He thinks to himself, we are the names, we are the addresses, we are the statuses. He thinks to himself, and now, right here, he sees us all. Sure, his eyewitnesses are saying the same story, but his eyewitnesses are his posse. They're his own people. And they're saying the same thing that Paul is. Just trust us. Paul's story is true. Yeah, you have faith that God could do this. Yes, you have faith that God is powerful enough to do this. You truly believe that there's no one person that's more powerful than God. But why would God go to our direct enemy? It makes no sense to you. Why would God ever choose this man? Why would God ever want this man? Why would God ever love this man? Why would God ever forgive this man for what he's done to the church? Are you supposed to forget about your cousins who are still imprisoned? And if his conversion is real, if it's real, and you still don't trust that it is, but if it's real, isn't he now in conflict with those in power? Which means he's not going to be able to release all those he's imprisoned. So if he's truly converted, those people are still lost to us, never to be released. And what about Stephen? Is he going to bring Stephen back to life? What about the other saints that he took their lives? Is he going to bring them back? Your struggle to believe Saul is equal to your struggle to forgive Saul. You refuse to believe him. You refuse to trust him. You refuse to tolerate him. You refuse to accept him. You decide you absolutely will not forgive him. And if he stays, you're going to go. And who could blame you? Who would ever dare to blame you? Which of your brothers or sisters are going to choose Saul over you? Will any of us in Damascus ever trust him? Will any of us ever trust the story of his own confidants? You begin to think how you could quietly leave this specific church in Damascus. You think it best, maybe I'll travel 3 miles to that church up the road. Yes, it'll take me 60 minutes to get there on a Sunday morning, but I could go to that church maybe instead of Damascus. You even consider how you can serve God just as easily on your own, never going back to church again. And you decide it would be just too difficult to sit in a pew with this false prophet. You mentally refuse to ever sit in a pew beside him or any member of his entourage. All of them liars. Amazingly, you decide all of this before Saul is even done testifying that Sunday morning. Given a 2,000-year retrospective to process the conversion of Saul, it's easy now that we know the end of the story to clearly see how his results, all his writings, all the conversions that came in his voice, his spirit, his convincing, you can now see that truly his was a genuine full conversion. Tonight was about trying to touch on what it felt like to be in the pew beside Saul of Tarsus, dealing with the confliction that one may have experienced in the time of Saul, dealing with the torment that that individual may have had. And it's really no different today. We're still called upon to accept or reject all new converts. We're still sitting in the pews with different people than ourselves. And I highlighted different. We're still experiencing different people coming to Jesus Christ. And I highlighted different. Our gauge individually, our gauge for different, defined, is born in our own perspective. And what I mean by that is we are what we determine as normal. So anyone who thinks differently than us, looks differently than us, speaks differently than us, are people that we're forced to accept, or we're compelled by the love of God to accept. It's up to each one of us. Your role is about accepting, not just tolerating, but I want you to know, toleration is step one towards acceptance, but your role is accepting those in your pew. Some of the converts that are going to come in and through wherever you fellowship will surely be the Samaritans of the time of Jesus Christ. We know that. Said another way, they'll surely be different than you. But all of them, please hear this, all of them will be handpicked by God. So accept them all, love them all, care for them all, grow them all up. And keep in mind that Jesus said it this way, you have not chosen me, but I have chosen you. And when he said that, he didn't just say that to you, but to your pew partner as well. So it's correct that you can't always choose who's in your pews, but understand this. If you don't embrace who's in your pews, you'll lose who's in your pews. Homework this week. Is there some new convert in your pew with whom you struggle? And if you have no new converts, change the word convert to member, to brother, to sister. Is there someone in your congregation, and if it's a new convert, even better, in your pew with whom you struggle? Now, I want you to think about them this week, and then think about yourself. Compile a new list, hear me, a new list of things that connect you. This is an old marriage counseling trick, by the way. You have a couple that's in crisis, write down the things that they love about each other, that they like about each other, that connect them together. You're going to do that with your pew partner. Think about someone in your pew that you struggle with. Compile a new list versus the old list that comes up every time you see them. That old list is the same thing you think when you look at them. When I see that person, I think this about them, and it causes conflict. You're going to put together a brand new list of things that connect you. You know, they do dress sharp, and I like a person who dresses sharp. I've never thought about that. They dress sharp, and that's a facade kind of thing, but you're on your way. That's at least number one. What else? You know, I've heard them testify a few things about their mother, and I've always loved my mother. That's number two. They love their mother. And start putting that list together so that you start working towards a relationship with that individual. Tonight is about taking responsibility for the new convert. It's not just someone else's job, but your job. Please consider each one of us have a critical role in the life of the new convert. You can't always choose who's in your pews. May the Lord bless each one of you. I'm going to stop sharing. You can open up your mics and we'll have some open dialogue.
Brother Doug.
Yes, ma'am.
I saw this in action years ago. There was a brother, he was called into the ministry, and everybody did one of these, like, what? You know, because he had a past, okay? And the brother got up, that I don't remember who it was, but they got up in conference and they said, so-and-so has been ordained as a minister. This is of God. And, you know, from that point on, he was accepted. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there was that initial you know, that feeling. But thank God. I mean, he turned out to be a wonderful brother and missionary and everything. Sometimes you need somebody, like Paul needed Barnabas. Barnabas kind of came in and helped him out, you know. So, you know, Paul needed someone to help him through the ropes, dealing with the congregation. Eventually it worked out, and we know that Paul was a great missionary, and I thank God for that.
You know, Sister Terry, I have probably a different twist on the scripture when the Lord says, judge not lest you be judged. And I understand this. By the way, the interpretation is correct. I just don't think it's correct enough. So I understand the interpretation that people put to that verse, and they say, that means don't judge that person as bad.
Yeah.
But I think it also means don't judge that person as good. Who are we to think we know each other well enough to judge one another as good and another one as bad? We don't have that discernment. We do, unless we do, and it's from God, and then you're going to see the goodness in all people. But what's missing from your story is the other guy who got ordained the same week, and no one questioned him, which means we all judge the guy on the right side, but no one judged the guy on the left, and we don't know either of these guys. No. The behavior in our presence seems to be good. So if God is doing the calling, and that's the critical point here, if God is doing the calling, then we accept.
Right.
Now, if the guy is cousins too, and that's a whole nother story. But for tonight's conversation, if God is doing the calling of his ministry, we're not supposed to judge. Not good, not bad, just accept that God is going to take them from this Sunday on.
Yeah.
Brother Doug, I want to apologize. My Zoom went off 4 times during your sermon, and I didn't catch everything. But what I did catch is who was ever sitting beside me this week, that I should think about them and judging. And I'm grateful for the brothers and sisters in our branch, because they have been so kind and so gracious unto me. And I'm just so grateful for all the prayers and things that all of you have offered in my behalf.
Amen.
I had my blood tested today, and I do need more blood before the surgery. So I'm telling you, losing blood is not good.
Mm-mm.
We keep you in our prayers. Second, before you came on, you were the question at least 3 different times. How's Sister Betty? How's Sister Betty? How's Sister Betty? I don't say that to lift you up in any way other than this. We are lifting you up. I want you to know, everyone on this call, and certainly much more than just Tuesday nights, we're praying for you, dear one. Just know that we love you.
Well, I had come on early, and then I didn't hear anything, and I said, let me go check. It was gone. So I don't know what's happening with my Zoom. I have no idea. So anyway.
Actually, I will verify Sister Betty was on first. I came on, and Brother Ken and Sister Betty were the only 2 on the call at that point. Of course, I hide and I mute and I don't open my screen, but they were the first 2 on. So Sister Betty, take this star on your forehead. You get your star on your forehead, and even though your Zoom went off 4 times, you still keep that star on your forehead. We saw you on it.
Thank you. God bless you all.
Love you.
God bless.
I wonder if there was any contingency plan in place for, they knew he was coming and they were fearful, but I wonder if there were any contingency put in place to maybe capture him, or, you know what I mean?
Yep. Don't forget, I made it all up. We don't even know if they knew
Well-
he was coming.
Well, yeah, but from a security, if I was back in that day, from a security standpoint, from how I act, how I am,
Right.
I would have something in place.
Maybe D, in every city they were preparing for this entourage of terror. You know, I think every area of the church had to be aware of what he was doing. So maybe everyone was trying to be as ready as possible. In my scenario, they knew there was some underground communication going on, and they knew everything he was doing. They had, obviously, the church had spies in my little story.
Yeah, well, you'd have to know the numbers of how many people, where and when, and
Right.
be ready to act if needed.
Yep. But I
But
will tell you, even as I wrote that, too many of those emotions I have fussed with in my own life during different situations, different different circumstances. So there's a little bit of autobiographical novelization there as I was writing that. A lot of those emotions
with the whole thing,
yeah,
you can apply it to exactly what's going on right now,
yeah,
and how people are feeling right now, barring anything biblical. But what we're going through in the world right now, you can apply every last word to that. That's how I was listening from a viewpoint of that, but I kept hearing the other viewpoint as well. But that's a conversation for a different time.
Point accomplished.
Has anybody ever watched The Chosen?
I haven't gotten around to it, but I have it on my tablet and haven't gotten to it yet.
I'm into, I don't know, second, third season maybe.
Yeah.
Quite interesting so far.
It's a different take. There's some liberal license, but
I'm glad you told me that. I'll look for that subtle differences.
yeah. Another thing that I was thinking is, okay, so he's here, he's in the pew, he's sitting next to me. I'm frightened. What do I do? Now here, as a man of faith, or back then, if you were a man of faith, you would want to show him the love of God even more, wouldn't you? And then see where he falls, because he's going to be tested regardless for a while anyways, until he starts proving he's walking the walk and talking the talk.
I'm sure that all kinds of emotions were involved in. Remember that my person never trusted. My person thought even using this to get into the church was a trick to capture.
Right.
So keep that in mind, that my person, and maybe it's me, maybe Freud would say that was me who was actually writing all of that, but my person never gave in to trusting at all. So I'm not sure that they would even feign the love of God. My person,
Fact.
yeah, my guy was leaving, or my gal, whoever it is, that person was leaving out the back door, just saying, you know what, forget it. This is too scary. We've all been fooled by him. And look at this whole congregation is leaning in and trusting this guy, and he's just using this to get inside. So I think, yes, some people would say, I'm assuming Paul wasn't completely embraced. I think that the Church of Jesus Christ embraced him completely, which is magnificence. But there is a counter to that there could be a valid question to what was going on.
Mm-hmm. And in some of his teachings, Ned, he comes across as a bully still.
I said something about that the other day, that when I was
he's a little hypercritical.
As a young person, I didn't like him. Now I love the writing of Paul. Now I get it. Now I understand even the hard side of it. He was that person who didn't want anyone else to ever fall away from and make the mistakes he had made. He had taken some bad left turns, and he didn't want anyone to. Effective communicator? I don't know. I mean, he seemed to be pretty effective in converting, but I always thought his writings were tough.
It's extremely personal.
Yeah.
I mean, how rigid he was before, he was just as rigid after.
Great. That's a great comment. Yeah.
So his personality may not have changed, but his heart did.
Yeah. Wow. And he's deep too.
Well, I think he's also a little hard, I think, because for what we have seen, I think a lot of us could say he reminds me of a reformed smoker I know.
Yes, right.
Because once you've been there and you realize what you were doing was wrong, then you have no tolerance for it at all.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's part of it. But I also think, except, so I can't think of his name, who was sent to Saul.
Oh, thank you.
Ananias.
Thank you, Ananias.
Thank you. Ananias, boy, it was gone. The rest didn't necessarily know, but I can't imagine that Ananias was quiet about what had happened.
Right.
So I'm sure, a lot of people had heard about what had happened. But I think for me personally, I don't know that I would have hated him. I'm thinking when you're talking about the person you described, it made me think, well, did they have a true conversion? Or a full conversion? Or was it just nice because look at how nice all these people are and how good these people are. I like being around them because they're so nice. And as soon as something was not so nice, that they gave up. But I think for me, it was, I would just be praying and praying and praying. I wouldn't necessarily hate him, but I don't know that I would completely trust him until I felt that God had told me, or I could see his fruit.
Good.
I would think I would just wait for his fruit, because that's how you're supposed to judge a man, by his fruit.
Just keep in mind the terror that he represented. Just keep that in mind, that he wasn't just a convert who drank. He wasn't just a convert who was rehabbed to some strange behavior. His strange behavior was he was destroying the Church of Jesus Christ. That's a strange behavior. And so I'm not familiar with hate myself. That's just not something that that kind of flows through me. And I don't know on many levels at all. But I have to believe that given the scenario, family members and this great hero, Stephen, who was stoned to death, I have to believe that it stirred up hard emotions in a lot of people. Fear often manifests in hate. You know, it often is manifested through hate. So I just thought, let's take this to an extreme and really stir the saints up on a Tuesday night and get to the furthest place that one might venture. So I used that as my scenario. I don't know that anyone would experience that, but I think it could happen. I definitely think it could happen to somebody. My Uncle Charlie was put to death, and I'm supposed to love this guy. And so I was thinking of that kind of emotion when I wrote that, Sister Patty. But I understand what you're saying. I don't know that.
No, and I understand what you're saying too. I just, as an example, the other day, Frank and I were watching a movie, and it was based on a true story of a man that was tortured during the war.
Yeah, there you go. Good.
And I'm watching this man, and he has suffered since the war, with nightmares and all kinds of things, just because he was tortured so horribly. And then they even show the torture, and I could feel myself getting angry. And then I stopped and I said, and I actually started praying for this man because I knew he was true. It was a true person.
Oh, wow. And
then what I found was very interesting, because this man who had been tortured, he would literally, envision killing this man, who had tortured him. And then in the end, you find out that he goes back to where, he had been during the war and where he was tortured, and the man was there. And he was giving tours. And so he actually was about to torture this man and couldn't. And he had almost like a revelation at that point. He goes, I don't want to live like this anymore. And he left him. And eventually these two men became very close friends. So imagine the forgiveness because I know it was, he was tortured for a long time, and he had it worse than anybody in the camp. And all kinds of torture. And I thought, of course they didn't show it in the movie, but I kept thinking, this man had to know God,
right,
to have that level of forgiveness.
Beautiful.
And so it ended up being, a beautiful story of redemption for both of them, because this man had repented. He realized after the war what he had done. And so the reason he was giving the tours of this place was he was trying to make sure it didn't happen again.
Mm. Keep in mind the expectation of God in all of this. So my guy who hated, or my woman who hated, I don't know who this was, but this individual who hated, this is only 15 minutes later. Remember, prior to this, they didn't know if Paul was even had already been eliminated. And he not only hasn't, he's being presented as a saint. And that's not a whole lot of time to process through all that you've suffered through for whatever time period. So this is an immediate reaction. And what we have to really keep in mind is God's expectation is to get over all of the emotions, all of them. Hate is the extreme, but any anger and frustration, he wants us healed of all of the experiences. So we have to keep that in mind, that his expectation for us is much greater than what we experience. I know he's a make-believe guy, but I'm not going to judge the person who has hate in their heart in that moment, because they have to work through that. I understand what you're saying, because I think I lean with you. I lean with you, Sister Patty. But be that as it may, I'm also not going to stay here and say, I'm going to hold that person with hate in their heart accountable. I can understand it. His cousin Charlie was put to death. I don't know what, I don't know how far we want to go in this story, but what he experienced must have been extraordinary and fast and thrown at this individual all at once. I can see it happening. I can see that person. Hopefully we recover that person out of the pew and they're back, but I can see them at that condition in that moment at that time.
The biggest thing in the whole story of Saul is he must have been making a lot of headway for the Lord to step in and save us again.
Yeah.
He stopped him cold in his tracks. And I don't imagine it not working. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, I think if God does that and then he's talking to you about it, I think I better make a change. But that is the biggest picture in this whole thing. The scenario, the miracle that he stopped him, he felt the need to save us again to keep this going. Otherwise, it could have stopped there because he was making a lot of headway.
Amen. Don't stay on this story because it's important, but don't get so fixated on 2,000 years ago that you miss what I was really trying to do today, which is how much easier is it for us to love and forgive one another?
Yeah.
These people were challenged with an immediate change from, excuse me, Sister Patty, from hatred to love is what the expectation was. Our differences, our clashing, our disconnects are so minor in comparison, and yet we sometimes find ourselves unable to move towards one another and love one another and get back together and connect with one another. And I would hope I made my point, which is giving you this extreme story so that you can compare to what the people of God had to do just to love this new convert, accept this new convert, embrace this new convert. And they must have, because in my mind, this is the greatest evangelist who ever lived. So someone sure expected or accepted him. Someone sure tolerated him. Someone surely embraced him because he was empowered, I believe, by the love of the saints.
So in this scenario, then, the conversion is also within the person that accepts him. They're converging along with him.
That's beautiful. Wow. Yeah. Nice. Well, we certainly remember what Sister Patty said a week ago or 2 weeks ago. My conversion will be complete when I leave this earth. So we know that it is a process. We continue our trajectory towards heaven every single day. Hopefully we're moving forward. So yes, Dee, that for that person in that pew who is leaving to turn and come back to Paul with love, that's a conversion in and of itself. That's beautiful. I did not have that clear thought. That's really great.
Playing along with the story and being the man that decided to leave, throw it all away and say, you know what, I'm going to go do it on my own or whatever. It just made me think who I'm really impacting and damaging is myself. And or if I choose to stay and still hold on to the past, his past, and just put up a face, but in my heart, just every time I hear him speak, I just want him to be quiet. It's equally damaging to myself to having been guilty of the judgment game myself. I recognize the pain that maybe I feel like I'm inflicting on, I'm getting back at this person because I'm judging them and sending, not pure thoughts their way or whatever. But ultimately, what we're talking about is it's damaging my own self and selfishly, I don't want that. I would rather choose to accept. I would rather choose to love. I would rather choose to help. I would rather choose to grow people, and all of those things are what's going to edify my own soul and not imprison me or tie me back or cause me to be impure or the wrong way towards others. But it's the judging game is it's a tough one. it's a tough one to manage in I know in my brain, but ultimately when we fall into that trap, it's only self-hurt, it's only self-damaging, and which then comes out in ways that others they're not able to feel love from you. And so I don't know if that made any sense, but but it's a dangerous one. It's a dangerous one. So choosing to love and accept, it wouldn't have been easy. It wouldn't have been easy back then. But ultimately, maybe being the guy that left, maybe it takes me a week or 2 weeks, a year but ultimately I'm convinced God would fall upon me to say, you know what are you doing? Who are you? That's my job. Who are you to cause this pain to yourself? And I got it, type of thing. So I don't know.
Beautiful. Wow.
Well, I also think too that, I mean, we know that Paul was converted, but even if he wasn't, even if he hadn't been, the point was, as brothers and sisters in the church, we should have loved him anyway. So if he wasn't converted, who knows? Maybe he would have been converted by what he saw. So that's not our job either way, I guess. We shouldn't have judged, or they shouldn't have judged, or we should not judge. It's our place to love, no matter who it is, in or out of the church.
Yeah. Amen. It's our strongest lead. I was not drawn in by the doctrine, but I love the doctrine. Please don't anyone misinterpret what I'm saying. I wasn't drawn in by the word of God, but I love the word of God. I was drawn in to Jesus Christ by the love.
Yep.
And that sentence ends with a period. For me, I don't know about anybody else. Some people intellectualize, and that helps them to be convinced. So I'm not judging anyone. I'm just telling you me. I was drawn in by the love. And then I scrambled to fit everything in to fit into places. But it was when I needed love the most, Jesus Christ supplied that for me. When I needed love the most, the people of Jesus Christ supplied that for me. So that's what drew me in. So to Sister Patty's point, that's our job. I mean, that's what we're called to do, to love. And again, I want to be clear on this, not just tolerate one another, but to accept one another. Man, it's a great feeling to be accepted. Today, Candace and I were talking about her parents. And sorry to make this about me. I don't mean to do this, but I'm a great example to use as the bad example. So that's why I do this. It's not about me. It's about me as a bad guy. So when I came into Candace's life and we started dating, I was such a weird kid to this family of traditionalists. In my family, by the way, I was normal. Just so we all understand, my family was a little off center, so I was normal in that house. But when I went to Candace's house, I was seen as this really strange, weird person. I don't judge them for that. I get that completely. But it really felt lousy not to be accepted by this people. I want to be clear. I'm not judging them. I'm just telling you how it felt. When I went to my first camp out at Camp Lutherland in 1975, I felt nothing but acceptance. I was that same weird 17-year-old kid, but I felt nothing but acceptance. That drew me in, as it does all of us. And so Sister Patty has hit a home run tonight. Whether he was converted or he wasn't, my job in pew number 13, seat number 4 from the left, is just to love this man. And if he's not in yet and he's faking it, let's love him in anyway and see if Jesus Christ can't convert this man who is so hard that he won't even give in at this point. We can still love him in.
as we were just talking, this story came to me. You know, as the ministry, we're often faced with the so if somebody asks for baptism, we are tasked with understanding if baptism is appropriate for them. Let's say, do they have enough? Are they sincere? Are they truly at the place where they should, you know, whether we know the person or we don't know the person? For some reason, the story just came to me, and it's if when I say Charlie the fisherman, if anybody knows what I mean by Charlie the fisherman at the California campout.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And this was a gentleman that we were out there baptizing several, and there was this gentleman was on a nearby pier on his day off. He was fishing, and he worked at the park where we were baptizing. Anyways, so he witnessed what was going on, and he made his way over, and he was overcome in the moment by the love that he saw, the events that were happening. And in that moment, again, none of us knew him. We got a quick story on what he was about, and he was a recovering addict. He was all these things. That's how he presented himself. And as he's telling us all this stuff about him, he then says, "Whatever you have here, I want it." And so here's that moment where collectively we're scrambling, saying, "Well, what do we do? How can we? This doesn't seem normal. It doesn't, you know." And so we're quickly in a spot on where we're judging on his sincerity level and what do we do and whatever. And thank God the collective group gave the thumbs up and said, "Yeah, why wouldn't we? Of course we go forward with this." And it wasn't about us to make the decision. It was on God to make the decision. And then after it's done, you place he's in his hands, and it was one of the most amazing scenes that I've ever been a part of in my life. And you just trust that the Lord has got him, and it was his will that happened that day. And all the events, I could go on and on and on about why we were there and how we got there. And it was all inspired, and it was all for that moment that Charlie the fisherman he committed himself to Christ that day.
I've not heard you tell the story that way before. Bringing it to everything got to that point, even for that man, for that salvation. I really love that version of that beautiful event. And by the way, there were how many baptisms that day, Jimmy? 7, 8?
Yeah, it was in that number.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a good number of people that it was for them too. Don't anyone miss our brother's story.
Right.
But it all came to that point so that, and I love that he calls him Charlie the fisherman, so that Charlie the fisherman was drawn into Jesus Christ in that moment. Fabulous. Fabulous.
Brother Doug, I agree. It is the love of God that brought me into the church. And I think love is I don't want to say weapon, our greatest weapon, but it is our greatest joy, our greatest way of bringing others in. It's the love in our heart. And it's the only thing that we can take to heaven is charity. So when we express it and we allow it to grow in our heart, we can be used more of God.
Amen. And it's not all, I hope you understood from the story, it's not always easy.
Mm-mm. But it is a choice we can make. Do I want to love or do I want to hate?
That's right. It's a choice. My person, by the way, that I defined tonight, Soul was recovered. He pulled himself back together. He didn't leave, by the way. He did miss the next Sunday. He struggled a little bit, missed the next Sunday, but he did start to come back to church, and he was recovered completely when Paul began his work. And some of you were
Thank
really
you,
worried.
because thank you for saying that, because regardless if it's a true or false story or made up story, you know me, I want to know. But then what happened? You cleared it up before I got there. Good job. You can always go back
The
while you're breathing.
little guy's name was Barnabas. We never know what happened to
There
Barnabas.
you go. Turned purple and started to eat people. That was wrong.
Nathan and Maddie, I don't know who was between you on my screen, but someone was there, and now whoever that was has probably dropped off or changed. You two are side by side on my screen now, so love is back in place. Maddie, if you'll reach your right hand out, and Nathan, if you'll reach your left hand out, you'll be holding hands on our screen. Yes,
The other hand, the
your
other
other
hand.
right hand, Maddie.
Other hand,
There you
Maddie.
go. There you go.
There you go.
Anyone else?
I'm going to take a liberty here.
Yep.
With Nathan. As our newest, you
Yes.
pointed that out last week. He's our newest convert, and just I'm going to ask him to say what drew him in.
Oh, good.
All right. Well, so I was born and raised in the church, so I've kind of always, had known the love of, the people of church and how it felt. And so I think I've always kind of known that. And then it was more just me really realizing what I had at the, when I asked for my baptism, because, a bunch of people asked on Sunday and I didn't ask on Sunday, but it got me thinking about asking. And I think it was more so it really highlighted to me what I've always had and not to take what I've always had for granted. And it really was, I needed the pointing out, I guess. So I've always kind of known it, and it was just like really made me think about it and sit back and talk about it a few days, especially me and Maddie talked about it for like 4 days in a row. And, really, I think talking about it and bringing it to the forefront really made me see what I had and what I've kind of always had. And it just, then I knew on Thursday. So 4 days later.
So between Sunday and Thursday, and this is part of the story you don't know, and I don't know part of the story either. But Brother Jim and I spoke after that Sunday and the wonderful meeting and Brother Joey's sermon, just the whole story. I was caught up to date on the goings on, and Brother Jim asked me to pray about you and for you. And I'm only saying that to say I'm just someone. I'm no one special. Please hear this. I have a feeling there was a lot of people who were getting calls and hearing, pray for this young man. We can see God working with him. We want to help get him along. That's the love of God that we were talking about tonight. That these people, that Brother Jim Lambert makes this outbound call to me with the intent to make certain that your soul is saved. I don't know how better to define the love of God than that. I don't know how better to define a minister than that he would care so greatly for one of his own congregation, that he would make an outbound call to say, please pray for this young man. He's right there and hasn't yet made that commitment. So I want you to understand, Brother Nathan, that that's the perfect example of what the love of God is. I would just venture to say, no one got a call in the day of Paul the Apostle or Saul of Tarsus. No one said, hey, pray for Saul. I think he's right on the cusp of getting baptized. Today, it's a different story, and you're certainly a different story. So it's a beautiful testimony. But know something, there's a lot of us who are linked to your testimony, and you don't even know it. I'm the guy who's telling you tonight. But trust me when I tell you, there's a lot of brothers and sisters out there who are praying for you from Sunday to Thursday that you may never hear about. So just know, there's a lot more people who love you than you think love you.
Mhm.
Which speaks to the importance of each other in conversion as well. Because for, as Nathan, as you were thinking about it for 4 days, and your mind was being converted to give in and make that decision, it's the Lord was prompting you, because as Brother Doug said, there were so many that played a role. And back to the story, the lesson tonight is the importance of acceptance and the importance of love and care and help and grow for each other. And that's why we have each other, for all those great reasons. And being a part of, so Brother Doug's a part of your conversion story, Nathan. That's as he said, he's not the only one, but he's a part of it.
Brother Doug, you weren't just a part of it because you were praying. I also had him go on the Tuesday night meeting in hopes that maybe maybe Tuesday would happen, but
Nice.
Yeah, no, we did the Tuesday night meeting. It was like we had Sunday, we did your Tuesday, and then Wednesday we had MBA. So there was several days in a row there that added up to it.
Now that you both say that, I actually remember that day. I remember you guys. I remember how you were sitting. You were on the left side of my screen. I promise you, I remember where you were sitting against the headboard, and I remember it really well. And thinking, this is the kid I'm praying for. This is him. This is it in real life. Zach Jack opened his mic a minute ago, so I think he has something to add. So I don't want him to feel. We didn't see him, so we're going to prompt him.
Yeah, just a thought. As you're, I love the storytelling aspect of it. It's great to kind of immerse you into that situation, but just the way that I think I'm not sitting in a pew. I'm still sitting where I am every Sunday, which is up front. And I imagine him coming to Kinsman. What is my reaction? As you're going through all of your reactions for, all of those kind of in the church, like I think of it as, what's my reaction as the lead minister in my branch? Am I willing to not only accept him, not only welcome him, but I think quite literally turn my branch over to this man to address the congregation, to share, his testimony and his conversion? Am I willing to do that? Not this first Sunday, but next Sunday and the Sunday after and the Sunday after and the Sunday after. Do I have the faith in the Lord? And that's predicated, I think, for the story on a few things, on Ananias' testimony of his shared experience of the Lord speaking to him, of Paul and his experience. Do I trust in the Lord enough to turn that over? Because I don't, I think you just said a few minutes ago, oh, he missed the next Sunday and came. That's not Paul. I think Paul hit the ground running. Anytime, I think you can read on later when he's talking or when others are talking, like he started right away preaching boldly. I think it says in that chapter that he was convincing them that Jesus was the Christ. So he didn't waste any time. He jumped right in. And, and then the follow-up thought to that for me is, how would I, as kind of the elder in charge, help my congregation navigate all of those feelings that you talked about? because I'm sure some were angry, some probably needed consoled, some probably needed comforted. Like, it'll be okay. Like, just, like all of the different, and how oftentimes we don't ourselves get to process because we're busy doing things that need done. And I don't know, that's just kind of where my mind went. But I love all of the comments, and my mind kind of went to that scene in Remember the Titans, where it says attitude reflects leadership. And in my scenario, in my head, my congregation would be following my lead. And, as we all do, I try the best I can to make my leader Jesus Christ. And so my attitude reflects his leadership, which, as our sister shared, is love regardless, love, just love. Mm-hmm. And so, would I be able to convey what I feel the Lord, puts on me? Would I be able to convey that same leadership to those that are around me and to Paul? So tons of thoughts.
Fabulous. I love that it's a whole different ownership from that angle. I will tell you where we are evolving to in our class. It's about the ownership of the convert. Last week, Brother Kenny Lombardo asked about the responsibility of the convert to better himself. And I kind of threw it back to Brother Kenny, speaking to those around. Brother Zach brings up the ministry, but maybe more universally brings up those around him. Tonight's story, I hope you understood, was about the ownership of all of us to that new convert. The convert has that, the ministry has that. God has a shared responsibility in all of this. So a soul is a precious, precious thing. And when a new convert comes into a congregation, there's a great responsibility for everyone to love that person in and love that person in by way of keeping that person. I would remind you that convert is a dynamic phrase. What I mean by that is we put new in front of it and you understand immediately what I mean. The new convert is that person just newly baptized, just newly came to Jesus Christ. But again, going back to the theory that one is not fully converted until they pass from this life, aren't we all still converts? Aren't we all still growing? Brother Dwayne brought a great challenge to us. The man in the story or the woman in the story that I was defining, that person has an opportunity to be converted by way of this incredible conversion in front of him with Paul the Apostle. So we are all to be cared for. Those who have a stumble and maybe trip and fall along the wayside and are coming back to church, whether that's by way of 2 weeks or 2 years or 20 years, that person also is the convert. And that person who stumbles for 2 weeks is no less needing the love of and support and acceptance of those around them than the person coming in after 20 years. So in essence, everyone in your pew, everyone, figuratively and literally, everyone in your pew has to be cared for by all of us, owning one another's salvation. I've often said, if we really knew what we signed up for, it might be harder to get people in than we think it is, because the challenges, I came in as such an innocent, having no idea. But I think also the flip of that coin is if we really knew what we signed up for on the good side and the glorious side and the blessing side and the miracle side, the relationship side with God and with his people, we'd have signed up sooner. So maybe we all signed up right in the right time, even if it was a Thursday after a great Sunday meeting. Oh, Jimmy's mic went open. I love these are I'm not a poker player, but they talk about a tell, and a tell is
Yep.
signs that the person sends. So here's the tell. The mic opens and the head starts getting rubbed, and you know Jimmy's about to say something.
Well, because I hesitate to say this, but because I know it's getting late, and I don't. So what just popped into my head is, how do I deal with the person that I love but I don't like very much?
Yeah, is tolerance enough? Let me ask you all that. I said on Sunday, doesn't matter who. I said on Sunday, sometimes it's enough just to show up. You know, the expectation is more. The expectation is hopefully we add value to every moment. But sometimes all you can do is show up at a meeting, and that's enough. In fact, that's glorious that someone made such an effort to get through whatever they're getting through just to sit in that pew. So maybe, Brother Jim, sometimes tolerance is enough.
There's peace in that.
Yeah, but what Brother Jim said was, what about the person that you love but you don't like?
Is that a permanent condition, or is that a temporary? And that's why I say,
You know, I think there are things that are irritating, you know, about everyone, you know, especially like those of us who are married. We know there are things about our spouses that irritate us, but that doesn't stop us from loving them, and it doesn't stop us from praying for them or doing good for them. And I think that's really the thing. You know, I think that's what God is saying. God tells us to pray for our enemies. Do we like our enemies? No, not so much. But we have to love them enough to pray for them, even though we don't necessarily like them.
right. And there are personalities that just aren't going to rub right. I mean, it's just not going to happen. But I don't know that I have to stay in the condition I am with this individual or that individual, and I can improve that. I'll tell you my quick story, and it's certainly not that I don't like him. I love this guy, and I like him very, very, very much. One of my closest buds, and it's Kenny Staley. And at one point, I knew I was driving him crazy, and I finally said to him, I remember calling him and saying, "Look, I got to straighten something out." I said, I explained who I was almost. I'm not going to go long on this, but I almost had to explain who I was with this as the addition. I said, I'm trying to improve in these areas. Said, but I'm going to continue to let you down because your expectation is very high in this relationship. I'm going to continue to let you down because of his strength, because of the quality of this individual, not me, the quality of him. We're at a place where I think he likes me. And so it's because we got it out on the table. The things that about me were driving him crazy, and he probably didn't like me, loved me, no question. I think he now has lowered his expectation. I hope I've improved in some of those areas, but all of a sudden he likes and loves me. And so I think we can get there, but I also think full disclosure and conversations and addressing some of those issues have to happen.
We can project onto others, and they might not even know that they're bugging us. They could have no clue whatsoever. It's all us. It's all me. I'm having a problem with this person, but I'm not addressing it. I'm just, status quo, going with the flow. I'm not going to say anything. But until you do, in a loving way, confront the person. But sometimes it's you.
Yeah, right.
And you just have to deal with that feeling
Yeah.
and move on, because if once you take it to and if you take it to the person and it doesn't get resolved, and you go through the ministry and blah, 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 and it doesn't get resolved, you're absolved from it because you at least try. And then at that point, you just have to live with it.
You have to also understand, you may go to someone and say, we don't seem to be connecting, and I'd like to work this through with you. And that person may say, I have no desire to do that. I'm good just
Right.
the way things are. Ooh, didn't see that one coming. Okay. But now they've kind of put it out there. You now understand. So Brother Jim, maybe you're never going to get there with that particular individual, but you've, to Brother D's point, you've done what you came to do and have realized, and you still can leave it in a loving way. You can still say, well, I'm not going to stop trying. I still love you. I would love to expand in this relationship. If it never happens, that's fine. But if it does, I'm always ready. Something along those lines, and leave that door open. But all you can do is all you can do in a situation like that. There's times I have to get to that point to desire enough to be friends. If someone rubs me wrong, it may be at such a point of irritation, I've got to fix me before I can go to that person to try to fix us. Maybe it's me who, to Brother, again, D just said, maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one who doesn't want the relationship. I got to fix that too. I can't stay at that status at all.
The plank in my own eye.
Yeah.
Off topic. Tomorrow I'll give you information because Andre just texted me that he's going to send out the Zoom information. I put the information about Susan in the chat here, but I'll also text it. I'll also text it to you after the meeting.
Thanks, bro. Love you. Anyone else tonight?
Stick around after the meeting. I got a picture to show you. It needs explanation.
Yeah, no one's hanging up. You understand something?
It's a fun old picture.
All right.
Not mine.
So your homework assignment this week is to consider your entire mission, branch, Zoom class, whoever it might be, and think about if there is someone that is not connecting with you and you're just not enjoying. Try to change your perspective. And it's by changing your perspective about that individual. Try to find some things that are very likable in this person that you may be struggling to like. And it's taking ownership and accountability for improving the relationship and the situation. Again, if it's by way of chat, or excuse me, by way of Zoom and classes, it's a little different. But if it's live and you're in person, and there's someone within that is rubbing you wrong and you'd like to go further, own that one. See if you can't make things better in that relationship. You might completely change someone's life by doing that. Anything else from anybody? All right. Love you all. I pray that God blesses you. I pray that you consider these messages. I confess openly that I went to the extreme in this story, but I did it with purpose, hopefully to help you see that maybe your situation, if there is a situation with someone that you're not doing well with, is not nearly as bad as you think it is. You could have lived in the time of Paul and had to embrace this guy who had caused nothing but terror for the church. I told Brother Jim before we had this class, probably months ago, easily months ago, I told him about what this story of Paul has done in my life in the last year and a half, and the impact it's had on me. And he said, do that as your class. Do that as your class. Well, having said that, when you study this story that way, it really lightens the burden to whatever situation you're in, whatever it is. Just consider this extreme Maybe you think it's silly, ridiculous example I used tonight, but maybe it's not. Maybe this truly was some of this. These were some of the emotions that people had to work through. And I had never considered that. When I think of this horrible human being being converted by God, I wonder if you'd even have some anger with God in that moment. And I know we don't like to ever say we're angry with God, but I know some of you and I know some of your situations, and I've counseled with enough people to know there are times, why isn't he answering me? Why isn't he answering me? Imagine what it felt like that this person that you maybe had the worst possible feelings about now is side by side with you in the work of God. And you're thrust into this relationship with this person. I just had never taken it to such an extreme. And so even as I was writing these slides, I was having so much fun with this, thinking, wow, and they could have done it. I'm typing that up. Wow. And when I got to the one where I hate Saul of Tarsus, it was, I can't tell you for me personally how powerful it was to type that out. I thought, I'll bet there were people who hated this man in that congregation. And they were being told, just love him. Just get over it. Just listen, trust us. He's a good guy. What? Tell my cousin that. Tell Stephen's family that. And so I thought it was a great challenge for all of us to consider and compare and then say, you know what? I think I can get along with Sister Sally 2 doors down from me on the pew. So I hope that's the result of it. And I hope you'll mend fences and love each other and make it all work.